Welcome. It's my delight to share with you our second show called Caring for Others, Caring for Ourselves. The focus of tonight's show is really exciting. It's called the Memory Cafe Movement in Massachusetts. I welcome the audience, and I also welcome our panelists. From left to right, we have Beth Salzberg, who manages the Alzheimer's Related Disorders Family Support Program at the Jewish Family and Children's Services in Waltham. We also have with us Jamie Donshin, who is a licensed social worker for the Brookline Council on Aging Home Care Program. She also facilitates two programs, Memory Connections Cafe and also Continuing Connections. We have a third panelist, Darcy Morales-Zulo, who's a social worker and a caregiver for her 93-year-old dad and participates regularly in the Memory Cafe. Finally, we have Arielle Keller, who's a senior at Brandeis University, majoring in neuroscience and psychology. She's also a founder of SIAD, Students to End Alzheimer's Disease. So it's my delight, as I said, to have you join us tonight as we explore innovations in caregiving support programs focusing on the Memory Cafe as a model and the Memory Cafe as movement. Beth, we'll start with you. If you could set the stage for us, that would be great. We'd like you to tell us a little bit about memory cafes and the movement that seems to be spreading across Massachusetts. You've become known as the guru of memory cafes. So paint a picture for us. What is a memory cafe? For those who haven't been, what does one look like?
Sure. A memory cafe is a welcoming social gathering for people living with dementia and their care partners. And when I say dementia, I'm talking about a group of symptoms that often includes memory loss and thinking changes. It can be caused by Alzheimer's disease. That's the most common cause. It could be caused by a number of other conditions such as vascular dementia, frontotemporal degeneration, Parkinson's disease. There are several. So I just want to provide that framework because memory cafes are programs for people with any type of condition that causes these thinking changes, and also for the people in their lives. When someone develops these kinds of memory and cognitive changes, often it becomes difficult to do the activities that they used to enjoy. And sometimes, even if they can do those things, they start to feel uncomfortable because unfortunately there's stigma. Oftentimes there's lack of understanding about just simple ways that a person with dementia can get a little bit of support to be able to, for example, go out to eat and handle ordering from a menu and money, financial transactions. What tends to happen is people can become isolated, and the key people in their life may become isolated along with them. So memory cafes really have the goal of giving people a chance to be together with others in an environment that's stigma-free and really welcoming and is designed to help them have fun. And for those who come with care partners, which could be a spouse or children or friends, to really help recharge that relationship. Because it's nice to do something fun together sometimes, not just to go to the doctor or be focused on problems. And just one last piece is the memory cafes are for people whose thinking changes can be very mild, all the way through people who have very advanced symptoms.
Great. Paint a picture for us. Now, if we were to walk into a memory cafe, what would it look like, especially yours in Waltham? So we're opening the door. What do you see?
Well, you come in and you see a lot of smiling faces. You might see Arielle. At the JF&CS Memory Cafe in Waltham, we have a partnership with Brandeis University, so we have college students co-hosting with us each month. So you'll see people of different ages. You will be welcomed just as if you were coming to a party. Someone will show you where to put your coat, where to get a cup of coffee. You'll see tables with flowers, decorations. There will be soft music playing in the background. And like most of the memory cafes, our cafe has some open time just for socializing, and then we also have some programming. And we have a guest artist every month. It could be a poet or a dancer, a musician, visual artist, an art educator. And so part of the time is spent with that person. But it's not a performance that they do. They facilitate something that we all participate in. And that really, it's challenging and fun to people coming from any cognitive level. And it's a way that people in the group start laughing and smiling, and it reminds us we're just all human beings together. So most of the cafes around Greater Boston and around the country are similar in that they often have some kind of programming. But beyond that, they're all different. There's one in Topsfield that meets outside in the warm weather and involves spending time in a garden. So they're just as distinctive as your neighborhood coffee shop.
It's such an exciting model. I know when I was there in Waltham, it was a safe environment. Easily, everyone was participating, in creating poetry one night, one day, another day, doing music together. So let me ask you, how did you first hear about the Memory Cafe model, and why did you think it might work here in Massachusetts?
I learned about memory cafes through some internet research in spring 2013, and started reaching out to cafe coordinators in different parts of the country. And one of the things that grabbed me right away is that everyone was so excited to share what they had learned and to send me materials. I would call, for example, there were a couple of memory cafes in New Hampshire, and I would call the coordinators and say, do you have 5 minutes? Can I ask you a few questions? And they'd say, why don't we send you everything we know? We're happy to. We just want to see these proliferate. So I realized this is a grassroots movement. It's something that has a lot of value as part of the constellation of services that's available. It's not the same as a support group. It doesn't take the place of a support group. It's not the same as a formal day program. It doesn't take its place. It's just one more type of program.
Great. So it sounds like you talked to other folks to get a sense of what was working elsewhere, and then you saw that it could work here. What were some of the opportunities, but also some of the challenges that you faced when you took the next step, starting to implement it here in Massachusetts?
Yeah. Well, our cafe in Waltham was not the first. The first memory cafe in Massachusetts is in Marlborough. The Create a Better Day Cafe was the pioneer and is the longest running in our state. And yet, the concept was very new when our cafe started in Waltham 2 years ago. And one of the biggest challenges really was getting the word out to people who might benefit from coming. I think when there's a new type of program, people hear about it and they don't really know what it is, and it's sort of intimidating to go try it. So it took several months for that word of mouth to build up and people to start bringing their friends. But once that happened, we have a full house every month, and we have a great time.
So what has worked particularly well? What have been some of the changes that you've made when you face certain challenges? What tweaks how has it evolved from that beginning point? Yeah,
well, I think because every cafe is different, and they really should be rooted in their local community. It's important to get to know the guests and respond to the guests in terms of what they want. So I experimented at the beginning. I thought maybe people would like to just sit and chat and not have formal programming. And they let me know, no, they definitely like to have something planned. There are other cafes around the country that I know of where the guests have said the opposite. They've said, we just want to sit and have coffee. We want to catch up with our friends from last month, and we really don't want to have something formal. So I think for those starting a cafe, it's good to be real flexible and make sure that you're in communication with the people who are attending.
I love that. So you're getting the feedback, and it's growing organically from that feedback that you receive.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So rumor has it that it's proliferating across Massachusetts and actually across the nation. And I hear that the government is getting involved, the state government, and there's actually funding available. so that it can start to reach out to other populations. Can you speak a little bit about that and your role?
Sure, and even to take it a step back farther, the first cafe began in Holland in 1997, so this is an international movement. And in some parts of the world, there are many, many memory cafes, or in some cases, they're called Alzheimer's cafes. In the United States, there's about 200 across the country, and as you mentioned, Massachusetts is really becoming a center for this type of program. There are 10 in Greater Boston now. There's 2 more about to start in Belmont, right here, and Newton, both scheduled to start this spring, which is very exciting. And it's really important that this model be available in many, many geographic communities and cultural communities and language communities. So we hope that there will be cafes starting in the city of Boston. We hope that before long there will be Spanish-speaking cafes. There can be cafes of other languages. Doesn't have to be called Memory Cafe. It can be called whatever fits for that community. But I think that for a lot of people, it's very comfortable to have an environment you can go to and meet peers, meet others living with dementia, meet other care partners, exchange information informally, and we want that to be available to a wide range of people. And as you mentioned, our Department of Developmental Services has gotten involved because people with developmental disabilities now are living much longer than in the past. So our society as a whole, we've seen life expectancy increase. We have an aging population, and that change has been even steeper for people with intellectual or more broadly developmental disabilities. And so those folks now are aging into developing dementia. So we're really looking at how to make sure that they have cafes as well.
Wonderful. Finally, before we open it up to others as well for the discussion, what has surprised you most, I guess, about the Memory Cafe experience since it's been evolving here?
You know, I think I'm always surprised to see, and very moved to see, how special it is for the pairs, the individuals with dementia and a close person who they attend with. A parent and a child, or a couple. You know, for the couples, it's like going out on a date. For the parent and the child, it's a really special time together. And what I've come to realize is that it's actually a form of respite. It's not the kind that we often think of, where the caregiver gets time on their own, and that's also vitally important. You need both. It's not either or. But I think people who are involved with someone day to day who has a progressive chronic illness, and that person with a progressive chronic illness, they need time to enjoy their relationship and kind of recharge it. And I see that happening at the Memory Cafe. I see people holding hands. I see arms go around each other, and it's so inspiring.
It is. Great. Thank you. Well, we'll come back to you in a moment or two, but I'd like to hear a little bit from the rest of you. We'll start with Jamie, I guess. Yes. How did you get involved in the Memory Cafe movement, and what role do you play in proliferating these memory cafes in your communities?
Sure. So I actually am involved in 2 different communities as a social worker, one for the Brookline Senior Center and the other for the Framingham Senior Center. Before I actually knew what memory cafes were, having spoken with Beth and becoming involved in her percolator network of different providers, I actually realized that I actually had been doing a memory cafe at Framingham already. It's going on its 4th year now, called Continuing Connections.
So say a little bit more. How is that similar, and how is it maybe dissimilar to the Memory Cafe model?
Sure. So similar in terms of a social model where both parties can participate, both the person with dementia and their care partner. But it's a more extended 4-hour program with the same 8 people and their 8 partners who attend regularly. but very similar programming in terms of the expressive therapies, exercise, chair volleyball, field trips, much more structured, but also similar. As for Brookline, though, after I got involved in the Percolator Network with Beth, I wanted to duplicate what I was doing in Framingham in Brookline. So I've been holding the Memory Connections Cafe, which is the fourth Wednesday of the month, 1:30 to 3:30. Again, similar structure with the social model. People can come in and be welcomed. I have icebreakers and sort of talking points for people to get to know one another. And then there's some structured programming that changes month to month.
Great. Now you mentioned the Percolator Network.
Sure.
Can you say a little bit more about what that is and how you've benefited from it?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's a way of different providers, both professional and personal, related to wanting to provide memory cafes, sort of getting together a collaborative network to see how we can make these bigger and better.
Great, great, thank you. So now we'll speak with Darcy Morales-Zulo. Can you speak a little bit about how you first heard about the Memory Cafe and what it's meant for you to be participating in it?
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to, and thank you for having us here and to speak about memory cafes. I learned about it through Beth's group. She has a support group for those of us who are caregivers. And we've been part of it since its inception, really. She was discussing about starting it in Waltham and what days to have it. So we've been there from the very beginning. My father lives with me. I'm his full-time caregiver. My mom passed away. It'll be 5 years next month. And at that point, Dad came to live with us. And we're very active together, and we're always looking for activities. And what Beth proposed was something exactly what I was interested in. As Beth mentioned earlier, respite is a huge part of a memory cafe for the caregiver, has been my experience. It's exhausting work. And when Dad and I go, I know that Dad is safe. It's a beautiful environment. Everyone is warm and welcoming. The guest artists are spectacular. And I don't need to worry. Dad is safe in case anything happens to Dad. There are others around us that can be of help. And that's when Beth comes into play with Arielle and other people there to help. They take care of the caregiver. And that means everything to me, because the very first time we visited, him rolling, Dad's in a wheelchair, rolling him in. I'm like exhausted, trying to get him undone from his heavy coat and so forth. People came right over to help me. Darcy, sit down. Would you want a cup of coffee? Can I get you something to eat? They took care of Dad too. That's heaven to me, because we need a little bit of pampering, a little bit of, I won't say it's pampering, a little bit of care ourselves. It's exhausting work. And it's so nice to see Dad interacting with each of the artists. And Dad speaks 2 languages, English and Spanish. And Beth goes beyond the beyond to accommodate Dad. She'll often tell the artist, you know, we have someone who speaks 2 languages, and the artist usually incorporates some bit of Spanish or a Spanish song or something to do with Spanish in the presentation, and it just makes my dad feel even more welcomed. So, and we're regulars there.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a particularly magical moment for you alone, or for you and your dad, or for your dad alone, but something that you've experienced or witnessed, you know, at the Memory Cafe?
Well, we had a group of singers, and they were singing a song in Spanish, but they weren't quite getting it right. And Dad piped up, and he started singing, and we all followed his lead. So he really enjoyed being able to contribute.
Absolutely.
In his way, and seeing people learning it how he was teaching it. So to me, once again, I was very proud of Dad. Dad was very happy to be part of it and a contributing member. And I think that was very comforting to the other persons there with memory loss, to see that a person with memory loss was leading the group. And that was a special time for me.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's really an important piece to the space, is that it to me, it restores integrity that's oftentimes lacking in other programs or other attempts to try to provide a space for the caregiver and the individual living with a challenging condition. And here you say he actually was in a leadership position in a very creative way, in a joyful way, which I think is really a remarkable aspect of the model.
It is, and something I forgot to mention that the Memory Cafe does provide is time with peers. Most of my dad's friends have passed away. My mom, again, will be gone 5 years, but there isn't a day that he doesn't ask for her. So it's basically my dad and I always. So it's an opportunity for him to be with people his own age, with other males, females, and I get to sit back and watch him interact. And that's so important, such a big piece of remaining connected. And he enjoys it very much, as do I.
I can tell. Wonderful. Thank you. Now, Arielle, you have a remarkable experience and unusual role, I think, the Memory Cafe. Can you tell the audience a little bit about, how you first heard about the Memory Cafe and what you do there?
Sure.
Great.
So as you mentioned, I'm a student at Brandeis, and it was actually one of the professors at the school that introduced me to Memory Cafe first. So she had been going for a while with her lab mates, like everyone in her lab was going. And they said, come along with us, and I went, and I loved it. I thought it was such a magical space and a great way to get involved with the community, outside of a research lab about neuroscience. It was seeing the actual, manifestation of the disease and getting to know the people, which I think is really important. So at Brandeis University, I'm also a founder and a co-president of a club called Students to End Alzheimer's Disease. And I immediately thought that this cafe would be the perfect opportunity for students to get involved directly and start to do some of that outreach that we all really want to, start doing. So what we did was we started getting a group together that would go on Fridays, and there was already another group from Brandeis called Companions to Elders that was making regular trips to the Memory Cafe. So we joined forces with them, which was great, and now we've got a big group that goes all the time.
That's wonderful. And so what kind of impact has it had on you? I mean, you speak about when you first got there and, immediately you loved it. And so over time, how has it changed you?
Oh, it's definitely changed how I think about Alzheimer's disease and other kinds of dementias, because there's something so important about treating the whole person rather than just treating, whatever's going wrong in their brain, and understanding the profound impact that these kinds of social settings have on people. And at first, I thought, it would be difficult to carry on a conversation, and I think I was a little shy at first, trying to carry a conversation with somebody where I wasn't asking about their past. But I found that there was something really special about just forgetting about the past, not planning the future, and just being in that moment with the individual and just having a regular conversation and enjoying the art that was going on together. So I really liked the connections that I made with people there.
So when you graduate, will you carry some of this with you, or how will that impact play out? What do you see?
Absolutely. I am going to hopefully be doing my PhD in neuroscience starting in the fall, and I'm looking to study Alzheimer's and memory and aging and all those kinds of things. So it'll definitely impact how I think about the disease, and also it's definitely made a lasting impact in how important I think the outreach aspect is. And I definitely am going to continue doing that, and it's great to know that there are memory cafes all over the country that I can go and be a part of and hopefully spread some more someday.
Great, great. Now, I'd like to open it up for our envisioning of the future. What advice would you give for communities and individuals starting to lead this in their community? What suggestions do you have for them based on your experience, based on some of the best practices that are out there? We've talked a little bit about the impact it's had on us personally. But now as a community, what kind of resources does an organization and a group need to have? Beth, why don't I start with you? If someone were to replicate this model, but as you said, make it uniquely their own, where would they start? How would they get information? And what suggestions do you have for them?
I would say collaborate, 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 and know that there are a lot of people who would be very happy to share information. There are toolkits that have been created about starting a memory cafe. Jamie had mentioned the Percolator. That's a quarterly gathering that meets in Waltham that I coordinate, of people either running memory cafes or interested in starting one. And we meet to help each other, learn from each other. Each quarterly meeting begins with a different person doing a presentation about their memory cafe. which is always really fun and interesting and gives all of us a lot of new ideas. So I know you have contact information at the end, and I would just encourage those thinking about this to contact Jamie, contact me, contact a coordinator of an existing cafe and say, hey, I'd like to come as a guest and check it out. I would say every month we have a couple of people come to the Waltham Cafe who are there because they're thinking about starting a cafe. And that's really the best way to get a feel for it. Mm-hmm. And then when you're ready to take the next step, yeah, as the real estate people say, location, location, location. I think that is going to set the tone for the gathering. It's going to perhaps dictate what kinds of activities take place. For a time, there was a memory cafe at the Wenham Museum on Cape Ann, for example. And so the activity involved spending time with the collection each month. So location is often the first biggest question, and it's a perfect question to spark collaboration. Who can you work with in your town that has a good space, and how many different participants can you bring in so that it really feels like a town project?
Jamie, can you speak a little bit to your experience in terms of leveraging existing resources, collaborating? What has been, now you're involved in 2 different projects, right? Mm-hmm. So what advice do you give and suggestions for going forward?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate at both organizations to have a lot of in-kind resources, but to second what Beth was saying, collaborations are key. No matter who it is, knowing someone who, even if it's just for one cafe, someone who will sponsor refreshments, let's say, which you really don't need too much if you get a crowd of 20 or 30. Or someone who can sponsor the guest artist, or even for the guest artists themselves, knowing someone who would be interested in being a guest artist, someone who, in my case, the senior chorus, knowing a chorus or a band or a singer or art therapist who might even do it for free, not necessarily for a cost. Making those connections and networking is extremely important. But I think also keeping in mind the goal of having those connections, making new connections, being able to use the abilities that they still have, music and singing and dancing and talking about long-term memories. All of that stuff comes up a lot, and it's really important to focus on all of those factors.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned cost, so let's drill down a little bit here. We've been speaking about collaborations, which is absolutely key, and location. What has been some of your experience with getting this funded? How do communities manage that, and what have been some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities?
I think one of the nice things about the Memory Cafe model is that it is fairly affordable. It can be done quite inexpensively. The most inexpensive way to do it is if you can find a friendly coffee shop or restaurant in your community, run by somebody who's supportive of this, with a little bit of a private space that has maybe a slow time during the week. There are several memory cafes around the country that meet in coffee shops or restaurants, and then people come in, they order what they want, and so as the coordinator, you don't even have to provide the refreshments. You just are there to facilitate and provide the space. So that can be quite inexpensive. At the other end of the spectrum would be a situation where you have to rent the space. I would discourage that. I think you want to find a free space. The biggest cost usually is the time of the person who's doing the coordination. And some cafes are run by volunteers, and that's wonderful, but I would encourage those folks to perhaps partner with a social worker at the Council on Aging, or just someone who can make it a little bit of their worked paid time just to provide that support, maintaining the mailing list, etc. Because otherwise it can be hard to sustain it over a lot of time.
And to be clear, there's no cost to the participant.
That's a very good point. So it's absolutely free, correct?
Completely free. Yeah. And something that I would suggest to someone considering starting a program is time of day. Who are you serving? What are their needs? Is a morning program good? Is an afternoon program good?
Great point.
I think that's very, very important to consider.
Arielle, I'd like to hear from you, and I think the audience would as well. How can we connect with students in our areas? You know, how can we do outreach, and what has worked for you in terms of getting connected and having this a meaningful experience?
Definitely. So when I started the club on my campus, I actually found that I was overwhelmed by the amount of students who were just ready to get involved and who are eager to get involved. So I think reaching out through a school is a great way to do it. You know, getting in touch with students of any age, really. I'm on a college campus, but I think it could work in a high school or something like that too. And I think that it's so important to get the student community involved. I heard a story from somebody about Colleges Against Cancer and how before Colleges Against Cancer, it had been sort of a taboo topic to talk about cancer, and then once that movement started and the younger population started talking about the issues, then it got funded and people became more aware of it. So one of the things I hope to do, and I hope that these Memories Cafes continue to do, is to get students involved who are in these younger populations so that they can learn about what living with dementia looks like and what it feels like to somebody and how they can get involved and how they can help. And I think that students will be very receptive to it and very eager to help.
Wonderful, lovely. Now I know we have some photos that I think Jamie and Beth have provided, and the audience will be able to see these photos. Would you like to speak a little bit about the magic in the photos that you've been able to capture and share with us today?
Oh, go ahead. You're going to start it off. Both of my sets of photos are one set's for Brookline and one is for Framingham. But I think you'll see that, as I mentioned before, the people connections, having a variety of activities, and having the love and care between partner to partner, whether that's again couples or adult children with their parents, but also peer-to-peer interaction. Even as a facilitator, I have to remind myself this isn't about me, this is about them and what their needs are, and being able to interact with one another, get to know one another, and not just have those connections while at the Memory Cafe, but hopefully continuing those outside of that sort of regularly scheduled time.
Lovely.
The photos that I sent in show some of the creative art activities happening at the JF&CS Memory Cafe. And I think the creative arts are really, really special. And I like that we're offering some ideas that people can then do at home. So, the old saying, don't try this at home. We say, do try this at home. And sometimes the arts can make people feel a little bit intimidated, because they say, well, I'm not a poet, I'm not an artist, I'm not, and we are really saying the arts are part of being human. It's something we share as human beings, and they are a way that we can get to know ourselves better and we can connect with others. And it's not about the product, it's not about creating something polished or measuring up to some sort of ideal. It's about having an authentic experience. And what we do find is that the arts really take advantage of the types of brain functions that conditions like Alzheimer's tend to affect last and least. So one example would be rhythm, which you find in music, you find it in poetry, you find it in dance. And it seems that rhythm is an inborn experience for humans. Maybe it's connected with being in utero and hearing the mother's heartbeat. We don't know. But many of us have had these experiences that even someone who no longer speaks can respond to music and may sing. So often in the course of these creative activities, someone will start to reminisce or just share and participate. And it can be astounding for the people in their life who have seen that this person has been more withdrawn, more quiet, not really speaking or interacting very much. Sometimes the arts activities really bring them out. And I think the same can be said for the care partners. It's challenging, it's a special experience for them too. And it often, at first, people feel they're a little out of their comfort zone. And I will say, and I know this is true for your cafe too, we'll never put somebody on the spot. If they want to just sit and watch, that's absolutely fine. But I think we find people sort of start to do more than they thought they would, and pretty soon they're they're really participating. And it's invigorating in a very unique way.
And it's important to note that people of all levels of the disease are welcome. Some are more functioning than others. Some are nonverbal. But the experience is so unique for each individual. And even if they may not remember the next day, in the moment, it means so much. And it's very gratifying for the caregiver and for the, I call them the loved one. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have a loved one who isn't, and we know they're not who they were, they will gain so much from this experience. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to add, to share with the community, the audience, with each other here in terms of the magic and the power? We've had incredible adjectives like invigorating, and we've expanded the notion of respite to actually increase presence and joy. Anything else that you'd like to add as we wrap up?
Sure. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Arielle.
I would just recommend to people who want to get involved that they, just don't be shy. Just, don't feel like you're going to mess up or you're going to embarrass yourself, and just enjoy it. And I find that the more I participate in the activities, the more enjoyable it is. And, it's just so meaningful. I'll add that adjective to the list. But
I love that.
It means a lot to see how much you're impacting somebody's life.
To try different cafes. I visited the cafe in Topsfield, and Beth mentioned it's a couple who have gardens in their home, and they're all wheelchair accessible. My dad's in a wheelchair, and everything is planted at the height of someone sitting in a wheelchair. So he's able to participate fully in the beauty of the garden, and it's a seasonal memory cafe. But there are so many different types of cafes, so one may be to your liking, one may not, but go out and investigate, check them out, as they say.
That's a great point. And actually your month could be full of, cafe
Sure.
visits. Even if they're once a month, for that community, if you're cafe hopping, you could actually fill your days with wonderful cafes.
And you make friends. You make friends, your loved one makes friends, and you as a caregiver makes friends. So you make friends, and so that's another level of support that we so much need, dearly need.
Great. Would you like to add, Jamie?
Sure, and to speak to your cafe hopping piece, as you said, I think it's really important for anyone who's interested in starting a memory cafe or attending, spread the word. We need many more of these in all areas, not just Massachusetts. There's a very large increasing need for all types of services and programs for this population of people, and memory cafes are a great way to start and to grow, and I think it's just a wonderful thing to see.
Great, thank you. One of the things that's impressed me is the generosity. Beth, I should honor you with this, of your collaboration, your collaborative spirit. So often there's an innovative model and it's held closely to the chest, so that grants can be garnered and resources could be hoarded, basically, but you've opened it up so generously, and I think it's remarkable. And I would invite all of the audience, and all of you in your communities to contact Beth or any one of us, to find out more information, and also to find out about this, the DDS funding opportunity. You can think about the needs in your communities and your specific, target populations, and we've spoken an awful lot around about Alzheimer's and other related dementias, but you can see who else needs this increased presence and joy and meaningful connection in your own community. So feel free, as I said, to contact any of us, especially Beth as the guru of memory cafes. And also a plug for our next show. We'll actually be focusing on innovative caregiving models as well, and we'll have someone from the actual co-founder of the Topsfield Memory Cafe on that show. So that will be wonderful. We'll also have someone from Autism Eats, another innovative model. So join us for that show as well. But be sure to visit the cafes, to contact any of us for information, especially Beth in terms of the Percolator Network and other funding opportunities for you and your communities. And I want to thank the panelists, for your wisdom and your expertise and for joining us today, and also thank the audience for your participation. And on we go with more Memory Cafes. So
Thank you
very
for having
much.
us.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Emily.